So I'm going to suggest we get started. I want to say first, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today for our Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center webinar, also partnered with the National Center for Safe Routes to School. We're here to talk about building momentum for youth biking. We'll talk bike buses, bike trains, and bike and roll to school day. So we're thrilled that you're here to get into this conversation with us. We've got a great panel. I don't want to spend too much time before we get into the meat of the presentation, but I want to take a moment and introduce you to those who've joined us today. First, you'll be hearing from Nancy Pullen-Sufert, who is the director of the National Center for Safe Routes to School and associate director of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center. She's been at the Highway Safety Research Center for 19 years, with most of her work focused on safety and mobility for people walking and biking, particularly children. She's developed international and national strategies for children's pedestrian safety, garnering support and engagement with city, state, and federal agencies and foundations. And one of her first roles at HSRC was working on Walk to School Day and helping gather examples of walking school buses around the country. So today's topics are longtime interests for her. We're also joined by Sam Balto, also known as Coach Balto, a physical education teacher and Safe Routes to School champion in Portland, Oregon. With over 10 years of teaching experience in Washington, D.C., Boston, Massachusetts, and in Portland, Oregon, Coach Balto loves to support active transportation to school with walking school buses and bike buses. Last year, Coach Balto started a bike bus for Earth Day, and what started as an opportunity to get students active while reducing greenhouse gas emissions has turned into an international phenomenon. His bike bus has more than doubled since the first one, and the videos he posts from riders have received millions of views. Coach Balto loves the power of active transportation to school, it has to build strong communities, and his efforts were recognized by People for Bikes, awarding him the Excellence in Bicycle Advocacy 2023 James Oberstar Award. So we're excited to have Coach Balto with us. We're also joined by Megan Ramey, who was born in Madison and raised as a free-range kid in northern Wisconsin, laying a foundation of childhood mobility. She became an advocate when her daughter was born in 2009, using a Burley trailer to transport her 6-month-old around Boston, which was then ranked fifth worst in the world for biking. After founding Bike About, a two-wheeled travel site, she realized her dream of moving to Hood River, where she began badgering her daughter's elementary school principal. 4 years later, he asked her to start a bike train in COVID October 2020, igniting a cultural sea change of kids walking and biking to school, including Megan becoming the Safe Routes to School manager for the county district. So a lot of great experience and a lot of energy on our panel today. So I won't take up any more of their time before I just quickly go through some housekeeping. As we go through the webinar, you all are in listen-only mode, but so you can't speak, but you can ask questions, and we hope you'll do that throughout the webinar. We've got a Q&A period, discussion period saved later to handle those questions. We're going to record the webinar, and we are also going to post our slides to a central website. I'll share that information out with you so you can gather all this information later. The webinar is being submitted to the American Institute of Certified Planners for 1 CEM credit. We also have a certificate of attendance for all of you. Once you complete the webinar and submit your survey, providing feedback to us, you'll get a copy of your certificate. The follow-up email is actually going to come later tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. It's going to have all the links that you need, stuff that we covered today in the webinar. We hope that you'll review previous episodes of our webinars and stay tuned for other sessions that we have planned for the coming months. So with that, I would like to turn things over to our first panelist, Nancy Pullen-Sufert, to talk a little bit about Bike and Roll to School Day. Nancy?
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to have Sam and Megan with us today. So excited to hear all of their wisdom and expertise and experience. We have seen the excitement about bike buses and bike trains really growing. Social media has been full of images of kids and families, even pets, rolling to school together. A concept that for some places has felt really distant suddenly is made very concrete when we get to see these images and videos of places that are making it happen. So today's conversation is also a great way to kick off the opening of Bike and Roll to School Day registration. Bike and Roll to School Day is on May 3rd. Next slide, Dan. So this one-day event is not really about the event. It's about inspiring long-term change, whether that's in improving safety by slowing speeds and creating more space for people who are biking and rolling, or whether it's about inspiring behavior change within families so that they're more likely to bike to school if they can. Communities have told us that their event has really created an opportunity for decision makers to see the need for safe places and routes for active travel and to get them to make commitments to those next steps. So we have more places that are better for walking and biking. I also just want to note that we recently updated our talking points and our literature review with evidence about the benefits and needs related to children and youth walking and biking. And the link for that is going to be in the chat as well. Next slide, Dan. So year to year, about 1/2 of organizers tell us that their event is part of ongoing efforts to promote walking and biking on a daily basis. Last year in 2022, in our survey of bike and roll to school day organizers, 3/4 of them, 75%, told us that their community was motivated to have an event by the desire to build a sense of neighborhood. This is the highest percentage for this particular motivation that we've seen in 5 years. So this means that the time really is right to use your event to kick off a bike bus or bike train. Dan, that last slide there. So one last plug, please put a task on your calendar today to register for Bike and Roll to School Day, or reach out to your local Safe Routes to School program or an elementary, middle, or high school to see how you might be able to help support an event. You're going to see Dan has been posting some more links to a couple different bike train guides that we wanted you to be able to review after the webinar today in case it's useful in supporting some of your planning efforts. So with that, I want to turn it over to our wonderful speakers who I'm so pleased to have with me today. Such an honor. So Sam, I think you are next up. Dan,
right.
Anything else from you?
Well, let's keep this party going. Sam, it looks good. You got your screen? Yep, all set to go.
Great. Awesome. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Sam Balto. I'm a physical education teacher and a walking school bus and bike bus specialist. And I like to say the bike bus is just riding on vibes. So let's get into it. Unfortunately, the state of student transportation is not wonderful these days, and we're trying to improve that. And that's why you're all here, because you care about children. The percentage of kids of walking and riding to school has drastically decreased in the past couple of decades. And I think there's great opportunity to reverse that. So let's figure out how to get that done. As a teacher and someone who's had crossing guard duty and bus duty, you really see this vicious cycle play out every morning and afternoon, where parents want to do what's best for their kids. And in our society, that has been deemed driving your kid to school, but thus making it more unsafe for other children, making it so that more parents drive their children to school. And we're stuck in this vicious cycle. And we're here to do something about that. And bike buses are a great solution. I have gotten involved in Safe Routes to School as a PE teacher in Boston, in Roxbury neighborhood. And I really got involved because I saw it as a great opportunity to provide more physical activity for my students. And in this photo, this is the first walking school bus I did in spring 2018. And from that morning on, has absolutely changed my life. It has every morning, every day has not been the same. Just seeing sort of the disconnected communities we have with our student transportation systems and how it was so different that morning with the walking school bus that we did. And I just haven't been able to unsee it. And we're here to do something about it, to create more opportunities for physical activity and building stronger communities. So the bike bus is a movement. You might be coming it, brand new, not knowing anything about bike buses, but it is growing. It has been around for over a decade now, for a long time, but it is constantly growing. So don't worry, you're not the first person starting this movement. This has been well established, and we want more people to join us. So what is a bike bus? I really like this picture because it perfectly shows kind of what's happening on a bike bus. So we got a bunch of students at the top of the hill. You see myself and another parent. We're sort of holding the kids up. we're going to cross one of our busier streets, and then in the bottom left corner, you got a bunch of kids that are just waiting for us to pass. And then once we pass and they find gaps in the bike bus, they come and join. It is so fun. The kids just absolutely love this last section of our ride. And the bike bus is just joy. If there's anything that you take from this, it's the joy of children riding bikes to school. I've written several articles, other podcasts, webinars about starting a bike bus. There's tons of information out there, but I think the keys are, if you're interested in starting one, is find another family, find another parent or other person to do it with. Make a map with meeting times, share it with everyone, be super inclusive and welcoming. Even the parents that are always doing the parent, driving line, share your flyer with them, put it on the PTA website, share it with the principal. And what I have found is being consistent, doing it, weekly if you can, once a month if you can. Being consistent is the special sauce to just absolutely blowing the top off on these. Bike and roll to school day is wonderful, and you should absolutely try it. And if you have capacity for that, do that. But if it's a success and you talk to the other parents and the other volunteers, see if you can continue for the rest of the school year. I think that's the real magic. And finally, just do it. Do something, even if it's 2 blocks, you can build support for it. You can sort of see what it's like and go from there. I am a teacher, so I have access to a lot of information that not everybody has, but it is important, if you can, to partner with the schools. I like to look at the school bus maps where the stops are, because a lot of bus stops are in walkable or bikeable range. So sort of gearing that 1 mile to 1.25 miles, or if you're doing a bike bus, 1.5 miles. 1.5 miles is absolutely bikeable for children. And the bus is, a great way to sort of gear where there are students who have needs. And remember, the bike bus can serve students outside the mile who qualify for the bus, but then all the students inside the mile to school that don't qualify and don't get any services. So you're, providing a great service for those students. And as you can see here, this is the bike bus map, our routes overlaid with students and where they live. And you can see how many students live very close to the bike bus route. And our bike bus route follows the Portland neighborhood greenways, which are preferred biking routes, walking and biking routes. There's great traffic calming. It could always be better, but it's a really great foundation to build off of. And what I've seen is our bike bus has helped the city of Portland implement some more infrastructure to improve the safety. And I think that's a critical thing to remember, is that the bike bus and transportation planners, we're friends. We need each other. The bike bus, wherever the communities are going to keep going, and we need the transportation planners to create that safe infrastructure for us. So last year we did Earth Day. I would strongly recommend trying it on Earth Day. Earth Day and sustainability is very in these days. It's a great, exciting way to get children involved. Kids really care about climate and being able to do something about that. And a bike bus on Earth Day is a great way to introduce it. And I think there's still time for you to do that. And you do a bike bus for Earth Day in April, that rolls right into Bike and Roll to School Day. And you just, it's going to take off. So we did our first bike bus on Earth Day. It was a huge success, 75 students. I didn't have a choice but to keep doing it. So we kept it going every Wednesday. And this is really where the magic happened. You might have seen this video or not. This is the beginning of October of this school year. So less than 3 months since we did our bike bus for Earth Day, we went from 75 students to 190, which is 1/3 of the school. This video has been seen tens of millions of times. This was done by a parent. It's absolutely incredible. But I love that I saw is that by doing it every week, parents and students could plan accordingly. You do it once, the parent's like, I don't want to get your bike down. We got to pump it. We got to get it checked. But if you're doing it every week, you're like, okay, it's worth it. Like, we're going to invest in this. I've been told very quickly, students were asking for bikes for their birthday so that they could do the bike bus, because they know that it's going to keep happening. And that is the key. I saw students over the summer who were practicing and learning to ride bikes so that they could learn and participate in the bike bus. And this is sort of like the past 6 months have been absolutely incredible. The bike bus was on Saturday Night Live. It was not the best joke, but it was there. This has become part of the zeitgeist. It's become part of the culture. And I think that, people understand what a bike bus is now, where we maybe didn't, a year or two ago. So it's been all over the news. Take any of these videos, take any of these clips, post them on your PTA website, send them to your principal and say, hey, can we start this? Hey, this looks really cool. What do you think about this? I think kids would really enjoy this. What do you think? You'd be amazed at how many people are starting, their bike buses in their community just by posting one of these videos online. Again, the bike bus is joy. People want to create joyful opportunities for children, and children want those opportunities more than anything, and they will show up. And the bike bus movement, like I said earlier, is growing. I get messages all the time from people around the world. The bike bus in Brooklyn, that's off to a great start. A bike bus in India. There's bike bus in Brazil, in Chile. There's bike buses all over the world, and there's just so much opportunity for this. There's a tremendous amount of unmet demand for active transportation to school. This idea of parents chaperoning and driving their children, we don't want to do it. I'm a parent. I have zero interest in that system. I want to build community. I want my children to get physical activity, because I know as a phys ed teacher, kids do better academically, they get in trouble less, they have more confidence. And there's just so many benefits. Pick what the benefit you want is, and the bike bus is a solution for that. At the end of this month, we're having a bike bus summit in Barcelona where I was inspired, and people from all around the world are coming to participate in it. So I'm really excited to see what happens when we all come together. And as you remember that person dancing alone, you're not dancing alone doing a bike bus. This is a movement, this is a team, you're part of that team. Transportation planners that, you're part of that team too. You're a critical part of creating safe infrastructure for these children to be able to walk and bike to school. So let's talk policy. 10 plus years ago, bike buses were very popular in Portland. There was a great movement for bike buses. Before social media, they were making national news as well. But when anything is relying on volunteers, it's inequitable and unsustainable. So there's a couple truths that I sort of believe very strongly. First, children and cars aren't friends. They just don't get along very well. Volunteerism is inequitable and unsustainable. Our community is very privileged, very fortunate. We have a group of dads that have flexibility in their time, and they can volunteer all year to help lead the bike bus. Not every community has that. All right. Induced demand is usually a term around highway widening projects. All right. But induced demand works in all capacities of our life. If we promote, build safe infrastructure, fund bike buses, walking school buses in your community, you're going to see an induced demand for more of it. Again, people want this. I did all of this with $500 grant from Metro Safe Routes to School. We have billions of dollars that we're spending on highway widening projects that are going to do nothing to improve the climate, do nothing to reduce congestion. If we took 1% of that in each state, because every state has a $1 billion project widening, 1% and invested into children walking and biking to school, we would see incredible results. Finally, we're Americans, we're around the world, but we can all do hard things. All right. If we had the political will to demolish entire neighborhoods to build highways, we can make streets safe for children to walk and bike to school. We can. There's just no question. It takes political will, and that's where we need everybody to come together. So on this volunteerism idea, all right, we love bike buses, we love walking school buses, but they all rely on volunteers. And our student transportation funds only can support, in most states that I've seen, school buses. School buses are great. I love school buses. I rode school buses. But if your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And what we're trying to do is give school districts, superintendents, student transportation departments more tools to better serve the needs of school communities. So we are working on this bill, and it's in the education committee. We had a hearing a couple weeks ago. We had an amazing turnout of students speaking about how they want this bill to pass. Again, the bike bus bill is about giving school districts and communities more choices to better serve the ever-changing needs, to give school districts more tools to support our students. All right, there's going to be a lot of questions. I'm so excited to answer them. I'm so appreciative that you're here. Again, our children and our communities they want this. They absolutely want this. Create it. Create the space, create the opportunity for children to experience the freedom and the joy of riding bikes with their friends. It is an investment worth making, and I am here to support all of you in this movement. I'm incredibly happy that Megan is here. Megan was an inspiration for me, and she's going to give some amazing examples of how State Department of Transportation in Oregon has been an amazing partner in her efforts to improve the infrastructure and to create more child-focused planning. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really appreciate that. A lot of inspiration, and we can roll right into some more storytelling from Megan here before we get into the Q&A period. Just a reminder that send in your questions, please, whenever you have them. We're making a running list for the discussion period. But Megan, we've got your screen. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you see everything all right?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. All right, hello y'all. I find myself humbled to co-present with my fellow Bay Stater and turned Oregonian, Sam Balto, who I am incredibly grateful to have as a friend and co-conspirator. My friends and family know I don't talk on the phone, so I think it says something about Sam and I's relationship that I pick up the phone for him. I will be presenting on the bike train and how kids' visual presence reminds us of what matters. My husband will say I'm a tad overcommitted. Besides being the new Safe Routes to School manager, I founded a paid hobby travel site called Bike About in 2014. I vice chair the board of CAT Transit and serve as the active transportation representative for ODOT Region 1, which is essentially the 3 counties in Metro Portland plus rural Hood River County. So I am passionate about childhood mobility because of my life experiences and the environments I grew up in. First, I was a free range kid in northern Wisconsin, whose childhood resembled so much of what the Goonies was about. Second, after living in the Atlanta burbs for high school, I totaled my car as a University of Georgia college student and used my bike and plus the bus for mobility. And then third, I had a fashion internship in London for the summer where I relied on the tube and my legs. Fourth, I moved back to my birth city of Madison to do an MBA using my bike to get to work and classes. Fifth, we moved to Boston, sold our car within 2 weeks. I had a baby and saw the urgency of safe streets through a mother's eyes. And you could say I was born into this beautiful Boston advocacy family that still exists today. And last, we moved to our dream town of Hood River so my daughter could live this Goonies life. And I saw my role as gifting the adventure and freedom that I experienced as a child to other kids and parents. I am incredibly inspired by countries that value childhood independence, whether voluntarily or for necessity, like Japan, Tanzania, and the Netherlands. But close to home, Oregon has a history of leading the way too. These 2 guys have been a huge inspiration for me, and I'm lucky to run into them as colleagues and friends. On the left, we have Kyle, who started the first ever bike train in 2009. And Shane on the right started the critical mass movement, and he certified yours truly as a bike league instructor last August. Apologies for my video disco theme. It'll go in and out. Okay, so my presentation summary is: number one, the bike train genesis; two, the nuts and bolts of how it works; three, the impact the bike train has had on Hood River; and fourth, what does our future look like? To keep my presentation within 15 minutes, I'm going to be briefer than I would like to in some slides, but please check out my notes if you want to dive into the nuances or ask questions. All right, Hood River is the Queenstown, New Zealand of America. It's incredibly beautiful and rich with outdoor activities and sits 60 miles east of Portland on the Columbia River, bordering Washington State. But our outdoor athletic lifestyle is not reflected on our streets. We have less than a mile of bike lanes. Historically, for National Walk and Bike to School Day, parents drove their kids and bikes to the Walgreens parking lot, and they rode with police escort down Highway 281, shown here. This is our school district building, and a few days after it had snowed. This is the business district and a 4-lane couplet that acts as a Great Wall of China between the neighborhood and the elementary school and middle school. This is one of our main streets through downtown that just got a $2 million renovation, and we got a consolation share. Kids ride on the sidewalk because their parents tell them to, but this takes space from arguably the most vulnerable user. So enter the bike train. A COVID silver lining story. So after years of pestering or badgering my daughter's principal, who's here, about doing something, anything, he and the teachers missed the kids during COVID distance learning, and he asked me to organize a bike parade so they could see each other. And I said, hell yes. And after 7 months of distance learning, they saw each other, and this was Hood River's first bike train. When I experienced and observed like the emotions, very raw, some teary, including myself, and the community joy that day, I knew this was something very unique. Community knitting is the best part of the bike train, yet equally as important, but more subversive. Bike train shines a light on the imbalance and absurdity of our street design, as you can see in Tom Flood's tweet. This is personally motivating for me because leaders can no longer deny the need for streets that honor childhood well-being. So this is the bike train on our 2-year anniversary of National Walk and Roll to School Day. And I think this site speaks to everybody who grew up with this kind of childhood.
There's so many bikes. Look back. Oh my. Oh wow. Oh, I can't believe it.
So Liliana's shriek of joy at the end there should just sell everyone on the bike train. So on to the nuts and bolts. Beginning with route curation, I looked at the bikeable area of the school and what were the safety barriers, those red lines, which are high traffic streets. Then I drew the route on the calmest streets possible using sidewalks and commercial cut-throughs where necessary. So the blue dots are the elementary school and the middle school, and the 3 gold dots are the low-income housing. Note those big safety barriers between them and the school. And lastly, the train timetable is based on the biking speed of a 1st to 2nd grader, but yours may be very different. So recruiting volunteers was the easiest part of starting a bike train, but keeping the volunteers is the hardest part. And I could talk for 10 minutes on this topic and would be happy to answer questions about this, but you can find my nuances in the notes. So don't try and be an expert at the beginning. You will learn as you go. Here are my 6 areas to be mindful of. 1 is volunteer mindset. 2 is learning the kids' names. 3, be Ted Lasso. And if you haven't watched that show, do it now. 4, stick to the schedule, like Sam said. 5, roll with the random shit that happens. And 6, for liability, the principal told me that he considers the bike train to be a parent-led program, and they treat the students like any other students that walk or bike to school. So no liability for the PTO in the school district. So if you do all this, you'll have smiles and endless impact stories, thousands of stories I've accrued in my memory bank. Liliana is one of them. She's on the top right. She first biked with a bike train on Earth Day and is now a regular passenger. Her mom would have never, ever let her ride her bike to school because of safety fears, but she loves the bike train. And so bike train is lifting up kids who would otherwise not have the means or opportunity to ride to school. So the stories of these kids generate endless energy from other projects. After 3 months of the bike train, I applied and won the $20,000 safety grant from ODOT to fund my time in coordinating bike trains and a walking bus, host safety rodeos at one city and one rural elementary school, and use the safety rodeos to ask who needs a bike at home, and then get bikes to those kids. And the grant helps me organize special days like Earth Day in April, and where we piloted a school street, which opens the street to kids walking and biking and restricts through vehicles. And then suddenly there was no vehicle drop-offs or friction on one side of the school, and parents absolutely loved it and said, when is this going to be every day? And I'm hoping to make that happen soon. So for the bike rodeos in the PE class, the kids learned how to ride or to further their skills. And I developed a huge appreciation for PE teachers like Sam. But a neat part was talking to them about the joys of biking. In the top left, you can see the most popular answers of where they wanted to ride their bikes. And in the bottom middle of what the bike is good for. And if you just let kids like talk about biking, you get the best answers that you can then take to your political leaders. So because I'm a volunteer for Anson's Bike Buddies, our free bikes for kids nonprofit, the PE teachers help me identify families in need, and then I get to be Santa with bike deliveries to the schools. So Michelle is a single mom. She's in that top right with that sort of a seafoam green sweater on. So she's one of my favorite stories. She lives, her family lives in low-income housing. I found out she didn't have a car when I delivered her son's bike and asked if she needed a bike. She started tearing up, and she said she would love to use one to get to her catering jobs. And then one sweet, sweet Gary Fisher later, she now has mobility. Again, bike train is a gateway for political leaders. Then Mayor Kate rode with the bike train, and I think it was eye-opening. So a few months later, she came on a policymaker's e-bike ride with me and bought her very first e-bike the very next day. Mayor Kate's council adopted the Safe Routes to School plan with prioritized infrastructure recommendations. And then the school district won the $100,000 ODOT education grant, which means I got a jobby job. I get to be paid to do what I love to do. And because City Council adopted the Safe Routes to School plan with infrastructure recs, this makes advocacy for kid-friendly street designs so much easier. My awesome boss, the superintendent, writes letters of support to the city or for infrastructure grants now, which cuts through the politics. Which brings me to our future. Infrastructure in all caps. And so my friends Melissa and Chris Bruntlett captured the importance in this tweet, which is if your cycling infrastructure isn't good enough for them, it isn't good enough. And Hood River County now has the programming, education, and staff, or software, as Active Towns John Zimmerman says, but now we need the hardware. So I use the Safe Routes to School plan surveys and data to qualify the need for infrastructure. Only 14% of our middle school parents would let their kids bike to school, despite saying they strongly support walking and biking access to the school. But I also remind leaders that infrastructure for kids is an equity issue, and some kids have no choice but to walk or bike to school by themselves on inadequate infrastructure. And when I hear parents with like 2 jobs taking time to drive their kids to school, it tears tears me up. So infrastructure should not be expensive. I am a disciple of Chuck Marone's strong town approach of building little wins with demonstrations or quick builds. That's why this project here is very near and dear to my heart. As background, the city twice applied for an ODOT infrastructure grant for a price tag of $800,000 and $1.4 million, respectively, for the streets in this project, and were denied. So I got tired of waiting for huge sums of money to make change happen and applied to the Portland State University Better Blocks program. And these planning students shown here designed a demonstration pilot for us. And then ODOT saves the day again with a $20,000 safety grant to fund the demonstration and the partnership after school club. So this 80s walk and roll club is free for 5th to 8th graders and has 3 goals. They are involved in demonstration project planning and neighborhood engagement. 2, we visit their favorite places in town by foot or bike. And 3, they learn traffic etiquette and law along the way. This club started in January with walks to their favorite places. And I already have such a strong bond with them. We did some door-to-door engagement for the demonstrations last Friday, and 100% of the neighbors were supportive. And okay, so for some reason, the club really wants to go to Walmart. They call it Wally World. I picked my battles and told them if we get all 33 supportive signatures from the neighbors, they can pick out something under $10 each. So here are some of the elements of the demonstration. The middle school is in the top right corner. These streets and this offset intersection were identified as a top 5 priority, infrastructure priority in our Safe Routes to School plan. And then here is a rendering of the project thanks to Transform Your City. So with only $12,000 in materials, we will demonstrate an infrastructure solution from August to October of this year, and then observe the student and driver behavior, survey them, and collect data for the city. So pending some city logistics, I am optimistic that this project will happen and be another way to rally the community around streets that are safe for kids. And yet, none of this would have happened. This project would not be where it is if it was not for the little engine that could, which is the bike train. So I really hope that Sam and I inspired everybody here to start your own bike train, do it. Make Earth Day your day to do it. And if you want to go into the nuances more, these Active Towns video casts about us are wonderful resources. So Godspeed to all you passionate folks out there. Happy International Women's Day. And all the mothers out there, I am here to steal anything you've seen here. So thank you.
Sam and Megan, thank you both so much. Okay, we have people who have a lot of questions, and they range from kind of like big picture questions to very detailing. And I appreciate both, honestly, because to me, it says people are really working this. They're trying to figure out how do they replicate some of the magic that you two have been able to create. So just for audience members, please know that I've done a little bit of rewording of some of your questions. So you may not hear your question specifically asked because I've had several people who've asked the same questions. So listen carefully. We're going to try to hit as many as we can. The first one that I want to start with, because we had several questions with people who had encountered barriers to launching a bike bus or a bike train. So I just want to start with a broad question for both of you. What obstacles did you encounter when you were organizing your first bike bus or bike train?
So I'm coming at this as a phys ed teacher who, works and is connected with the school very closely. I experience very few obstacles. I have found throughout my years of doing this, if I have parent support and I have money, I can kind of do whatever I want. If I'm going to go to the principal and say, hey, I want to do a, walking school bus or a bike bus, these parents are already volunteering. I'm not asking you for any money. They wouldn't say no. So I think it's about like how you approach it, sort of just, administrators are incredibly overwhelmed. So sort of like the more you can just take off their plate and make it easy for them to say yes, I would strongly, suggest that. I think I put it in a comment, but we don't ask parents to sign liability or to check with the principal to carpool. I don't see why we would need that for families to organize themselves and to ride bikes to school. And if the administrator or the school community is concerned around safety, invite them to send a letter to the city to promote, safe infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I
Megan?
would say I had the same very easy startup because again, the principal approached me and so I'm just like Sam. I can do things like overnight if I want to when I'm passionate about it. So, but I will say that an obstacle in like an early startup hiccup was that I wish I could have gone to in my presentation was these kids and most kids in America have never biked on the street before because they've never learned how to do that. They've never ridden outside of like a rail trail, or their bikes have always been put on cars to go places. And so that kind of that upstart of teaching them how to bike in the street and just lowering your blood pressure a little bit as a volunteer is so important to do, and just realize it's not their fault. And you're doing the best you can to help educate them, and just try and instill that in the other volunteers, because I've had volunteers who've almost had, panic attacks. Because I mean, this is the state, this is our, so our infrastructure is where it's at, and our kids' education is where it's at. You got to break this horrible chicken and egg cycle somehow. And as long as you're doing the best you can to keep them safe and happy, that's what you can do.
We've had several questions about liability. And I think what I'm hearing from both of you is that your school districts really view it as same as students who are walking and biking directly to the school, same. And Sam, you make this really good point about like, we don't ask people to sign liability waivers when they're driving their children to school. So for both of you in your direct experience, it's been a fairly easy path in terms of addressing liability concerns. But I want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of people are asking questions around that. Dan dropped a couple of bike train guides into the chat that people could go and read a little bit more about addressing liability there as well. And then, any other comments that Megan and Sam you want to make, or other communities that you've talked to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that liability question is, it comes up a ton. It's a very valid question and concern. Again, I think it's just like asking, where is this question coming from? Even if everybody, had liability forms signed, or you did X, Y, or Z, it's a dynamic environment. School buses are not perfect. They are, there's crashes, children get hit. There are, parents driving their kids to school. And I think also this idea of liability is, there's children who don't qualify for a school bus, who just have to navigate our streets alone, who don't have parents who can walk them, who don't have members of their community. who can, support them. And there's parents who just say like, sorry, like this is the best I can do. You have to navigate these dangerous arterial roads alone. But like, hey, we don't have to take on the liability of those kids. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's right. And that's why we do this. So just remember, like, throwing up this liability question does not keep our vulnerable children safe. And I think centering those kids, I've always found who is the most vulnerable kid getting to school. And if we can make that experience safe for them, all children will benefit from that. The whole community will benefit when we center the most vulnerable students.
The liability issue in general, it's when the person asks that question, are they coming from a place of good faith or bad faith? Are they asking about liability because they want to shut down they don't want to do the project, or do they genuinely want to make it happen? And so I wouldn't let it be an obstacle. I hear just randomly from volunteers that are worried about their personal liability, and that may be a question. I don't know if that's what a liability waiver like solves, but we don't have liability waivers. And I mean, these parents that are entrusting us to take their kids to school, they trust us. So like Liliana's mom, she loves the fact that her kid can bike to school, and it's so much safer than she has no time on her hands for her to let Liliana bike to school by herself. So I don't know. This is like something that can stop projects from happening, but I would really suggest just get your project off the ground, get your bike train or bike bus off the ground, and worry about that stuff later.
So
and
let me
just
ask.
to remember, wait, one more, sorry.
Go
You could
ahead,
have
Sam.
all the liabilities, you could make every parent sign it, and something could still happen, and you can still get sued. You still have to go through that process. So like, just do it.
Okay, so here is a burning question we have from folks after watching some of the videos that we saw in your presentations, as well as like we see on social media, which is around the fact that we're seeing students who are filling the streets, which is such an awesome image. But people also have questions about, hey, is there traffic control happening? Is that a bike only street that you're on? So they're kind of asking questions about how's that work logistically. And Sam, you had mentioned that the street that you were riding on is part of kind of the Greenway traffic calmed system through Portland, but I don't know that I'm assuming you still have motor vehicles.
Yeah, I think, we've done a lot of things to sort of message the neighborhood. So we hand out flyers. Once we saw that it was like a critical mass of kids, we handed out flyers to all the neighbors on the street. It's been in the news locally. So most members of our community, when they see the bike bus coming, they understand and they just pull over and wait. I talk to the kids, they don't go in front of me. We're very in tune of like the cross traffic. We have volunteers, members of the community that like will wait at certain cross streets to just say, hey, you can turn around. We're going to be a minute. I mean, we're really big. Like we go for blocks. So it can be a minute or two. But you think about it, these drivers could easily be stuck behind 100 parents driving their kids individually to school. So just because it's kids biking, we like put our hands up, what's going on? They're making me late for work. But this would be just car traffic. We'd be like, oh, okay, this is car traffic. We expect that. We do a lot to just message and generally speaking, but the biggest thing is recently we had a diverter put in on our greenway, and the impact that diverter had is tremendous. As a person who leads the bike bus, Scott Cohen of PBOT, thank you. it got a ton of pushback from the community, people not wanting to change. They like to drive down this street, but it's a greenway. And the difference is night and day. Absolutely. The amount of cars using greenways as cut throughs, you add a diverter, drastically decrease. And it just makes it safer and calmer for children to ride bikes to school. And I think that's how we create a sustainable change. It has to also include infrastructure.
Mhm.
So the
So-
video I showed quickly that had Liliana shrieking at the end, that was National Walk and Roll to School Day from Earth Day, and actually no, it's from this past October. And so that is a bigger than normal bike train. Normally we have between like 5 kids in the winter and then about 15 any other time. So I'm totally fine taking up this, that was a neighborhood street. Like that's fine for the kids to take up the street for like a couple days a year. But in general, we tend to ride a single file, and we really don't have any infrastructure. The kids are like on and off the sidewalk. Sam's been to see our route, and it's just kind of it's kind of crazy. We have to ride on the sidewalk on the edge of a major highway, not a major, like a highway that goes through our town. So once we get to the neighborhood streets though, the kids need, like, if they have to ride in single military style file the whole way, that totally takes away the bike train joy. They need to be able to ride next to each other. So as soon as we hit the neighborhood streets, I'm like, anything goes, have fun, you know, like within reason. I obviously, we observe the Oregon stop as yield law, and yeah, it's wonderful for them.
Thanks, Megan. Megan, I have a couple other questions for you, but I wonder, would you try turning your camera off and turning it back on again? Let's see if we can get you back in the image, and yeah, maybe just give it a beat and let's see if we can get you back. Ah, there you are. Okay, great. Cool. Okay, so these are a few more questions that Megan, I was wondering if you might answer. With people who have questions again about sort of the logistics of the route. And number one, are you, and I apologize if you said this in your presentation and I missed it. Are you going with students to school and home again?
I am both taking them to and taking them home. And so we have volunteers that sign up for different shifts, usually based on their work schedule. And in terms of the route curation, that's something else I wanted to mention, because Bike About is like my side hobby. And I make bike maps and curate the calmest routes through cities. Like I have 30 travel guides now on on Bike About. So this is easy for me, but I can understand how curating a route might be hard. And yeah, reach out to Sam or I, because we can help you do that.
And then do you have multiple, like, do students come directly from their homes, or do you have like stopping points along the way?
It's just like a bus stop. Like they congregate around a stop at a particular time. And it was like Sam was explaining, where the train passes by and they join. And so, yeah, it just, if you think about it, just like a school bus schedule and a route, that's exactly how it works.
What's also nice about bike buses is, you know, if you can just sort of plan accordingly. You don't have to be at a specific place. You just have to be on the route, you know, before we pass by, and then you can just hop right in. So it's a lot more fluid, and it's, you know, not as like rigid. So a parent, you know, might walk their kid to, you know, or bike with their kid to a spot on the route. We come by, they hop in, the parent says bye, and the parent just, you know, gets to turn around and go home. And it's been, you know, great to see children as young as kindergarten, first graders riding and joining the bike bus alone. Like when you think about scaffolding independence, it's not easy as a parent to know that sort of, you know, when it's appropriate to give your kid opportunities for independence. The bike bus, walking school buses, when they're with, you know, a other caring adults, it's absolutely critical to take, these opportunities to give your children independence. And it's been great to see my students advocating to their parents saying, hey, I want to do the bike bus because it's important for my independence. And I want to be able to bike to my friend's house, bike to the grocery store, bike to a job. And like, we need to be doing those things now to supporting parents and supporting children so they're not 16, 18, and they don't know how to ride the bus or how to bike anywhere.
So speaking of being 16 or being older than elementary, we had a couple of questions from people who would love to hear more about considerations for middle school and high school students. And Megan, you talked about the 80s club. I love that. So you've had some specific experience, but any sort of general pointers when we think about using the bike bus model to attract and support older riders, middle and high school?
Yeah, I wish I had Sam's bike bus population seems to be older, but in Hood River it seems like the 4th and 5th graders graduate out of the bike train, and I think it's wonderful. They like ride with us, they learn the routes, their parents give them the okay, then they can independently ride to school. So they're kind of too cool for the bike train. And so I don't know how a middle school bike train would work. I've had a couple of parents ask about it, but really the need based on the Safe Routes to School survey was that middle school parents, they scratch their heads why there's no free after school activities. And so the after school club was my solution for that, and to teach them traffic and transportation etiquette under the guise of taking them to their favorite places around town. And they love it. So it might not be the bike train or bike bus model for the middle school, but who knows, you might have some middle schoolers that like that too. Yeah.
I'd also like to add, when I was talking to my students last year about Bike Bus for Earth Day, before we even did it, my 5th graders had organized themselves and were riding to school. Like sometimes they just need that idea sparked in their head, and you sort of say like, you can do this without me. Like, you guys know where each other live, find a time to meet and bike together. And I think, middle school teachers reach out to me, high school teachers reach out to me, and we just need like to support them a little bit. You think about it, we spent the past 70 years prioritizing the movement of motor vehicles. It makes sense that like these ideas are not innate to us. And so we just need, adults, caring adults, sort of, especially at, schools, teachers have a unique way to connect with students and to sort of help organize that and help facilitate it. And, maybe you just do it a couple times and they're like, oh, I know the route. We know what time we meet. I know who we're going to expect to pick up, and it just becomes their new norm.
Yeah, love that. Okay, a couple of lightning round questions. Sam, you are getting compliments on your jacket. People want to know more.
Oh,
Where'd you get it? How do they get one?
Clever Hood Bike Bus, 20% goes to nonprofits around the country who are doing bike education. Absolutely, they're an amazing partner. There's kid capes as well. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I got awesome bike bus gear. This is so big.
Yeah, very cool.
Clever.
Okay,
yeah.
E-bikes. Let's talk about e-bikes for a second. What are you seeing as being kind of their role in encouraging, supporting riding? Where are you at with e-bikes?
I could do an entire hour-long conversation about this, and there's quickly 2 points. One, it's replacing vehicle pickup and drop-offs. Parents are so happy to use an e-bike to take their kids to school versus I think they skip that vehicle drop-off line. It's like the red carpet to school. The second is on the flip side, Hood River is a petri dish for kids who are essentially not legal, borrowing their parents' e-bikes and riding to school. And it's like the most amazing problem ever to have, because on one side, you have these kids who are newly discovering, you know, the actual functional aspect of e-bikes, but they have no education and they have no infrastructure. So I am like rapidly trying to help them. Like I consider myself like somebody teaching them how to fly.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm very pro e-bikes. E-bike, you know, more people riding bikes means less cars, means safer for everybody. So, you know, there'll be a couple of growing pains, but I think I love these images that Megan has shared of like 2 middle schoolers or 2 high schoolers, one sitting on the back, and they're going, you know, wherever they might be going. And this is about, you know, childhood mobility, and children are allowed to take up space. They are allowed to move places on their own. And if you have a problem with that, then create safe infrastructure for them.
Right. Which circles me back to maybe a nice note for us to finish on is something that Megan and I talked about when we were planning. And then Megan, I saw that you had it in the title of your webinar, which is this idea that we are trying to create a visual presence for what's important. And Sam and Megan, I think you both have spoken to that so well about the value and importance of making space for kids to explore and be independent and actively travel to school, and how the bike bus and bike train can be a really important part of that. So thank you so much. I see Dan's here to tell us we need to close out.
Thank you. I wish we had another hour to spend with you all, but
Yes.
everyone has to get back to their meetings and their lunches and all the other things they're doing. So thank you again so much for sharing your stories with us. And thanks for you all for attending. When you close the webinar, when we end it, you're going to see a brief feedback survey there. If you fill out those questions at the end, you're going to get your certificate of attendance for the webinar. So if you don't have time to do it now, we're going to email it out to you tomorrow too. Stay tuned for that follow-up email with the recording, the slide copies, things like that. So until next time, everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you on our next session. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.